The devs should be selling this game on Audible, because the hours of talking we're about to endure means Vampyr is closer to an audiobook than a game.
What is darkness but lurking sun? What is wall but enslaved stone?
This opening narration makes me long for the simple days of Dracula asking Richter Belmont about the nature of man.
What is hate but jilted love? What is life but death pending?
Woof. I am going to need some sandpaper for that edge. Vampyr is not a game to be tossed aside lightly. It should be thrown with great force. If you think it might be a bit much to paraphrase the famous negative review of Ayn Rand's seminal work when discussing a vampire game, you would be wrong. The endless yammering the characters get up to and the pointed social commentary the game happily drills into your cranium combine to create the Atlas Shrugged of vampire fiction. Hopefully this won't inspire impressionable young politicians to destroy the fabric of society in a few decades. Let's just make our corpse pit for disposing of infected bodies right here in the middle of the industrial district. I foresee no issues at all. Jonathan's sister came out to the pit where Spanish flu corpses are thrown, expecting to find her brother alive and well. Dead family member for motivation cliché. This game is so boring that I think I need a family member to die at this game's hands in order to continue sinning it.
No!
I'm pretty certain there is no way you could see clearly what Jonathan did from that angle and that distance at night. It was the dead of night just as Jonathan entered this building. In the few seconds this guy held Jonathan up for, the sun came out strong enough to shine through the cracks and burn Jonathan's arm. Yet Jonathan leaves this building a minute later and walks down the street looking for a place to rest and is just fine. Jonathan was dead when they threw him into the pit. Even if he was in the process of becoming a vampire, he wouldn't remember those guys stealing his pocket watch. If you are not going to create a working mirror in your game that can display reflections, don't have a scene where someone looks into a mirror to check their appearance. Furthermore, Jonathan shouldn't have a reflection at all since he's a vampire. This is the third flashback in the last 5 minutes. Everything Jonathan comes in contact with is causing him to remember defining moments from his life. Now he's flashing back to when he killed his sister only a few minutes ago. Good times.
Mary, I'm sorry. Whoever did this to us, I will find them.
But first, I'm going to try to kill myself. Swear I'll get to it right after that. No one seems concerned about the guy who just walked into the pub with demonic red eyes and blood all over him. In fact, no one will ever notice Jonathan's inhuman eyes for the entire game. This game has to be the worst instance of branching conversation cutscenes out there. Just because you have two characters standing still doesn't mean you can just keep the camera focused on the person Jonathan is speaking to. You still have to animate your camera to keep it refreshing, and have characters make some facial movements when they say something important. Everyone in this game seems like they're on Botox and lethal injection level muscle relaxers. Jonathan found a drained body on the streets and assumed the killer stuck around for a beer afterward. He has no reason to believe it's the same person who turned him since he was in another district when he was attacked.
I'm looking for someone who might have passed through here recently. Wondered if you might help.
It's been quiet tonight. The only other person I've seen went straight up to his room.
It's just some guy renting a room. There is no reason to believe he has any connection to vampires. So of course the man knows everything about vampires, and was even talking to one when Jonathan eavesdropped on him.
They're looking for vampires, and they're most efficient.
For a game titled Vampyr that even uses the Y in the title as an objective marker, all of the characters use the word vampire.
I heard another voice, that of a woman. Who were you talking to?
Ridiculous. I've no idea what you're talking about.
The vampire you were talking to when Jonathan showed up was the one who informed you that someone was eavesdropping. There's really no point in lying about it since you know that he knows that you were talking to someone.
What happened tonight?
He was dead drunk as usual. But my God, his eyes, his face. He must have caught something awful.
The game seems to forget that the guy is a vampire and therefore doesn't drink anything but blood, something the game confirms much later. Yet the killer stalking the docks came to this bar for food and drink. Also, this is what the killer looks like. A mad ghoul of a vampire called a Scowl that neither looks or acts remotely human anymore, but was able to visit a pub without causing much of a stir or killing anyone even though he lives in a dockhouse full of hanging bodies. Also, Dr. Swansea was staying in the pub when William Bishop visited it, and Swansea is also looking for the killer and would recognize a vampire, yet was completely clueless about the event that took place in the very bar he was renting a room from. In fact, William was hiding in a building just across from him.
William was an honorable man. I could have saved him.
You're in a building where corpses are wall decorations. I think the guy might have been beyond salvation. Teleportation is always used to be a dick cliché.
By George and the Saints, you've solved the mystery of these terrible murders.
No thanks to you. And since you arrived here without Jonathan telling you of William's location, I have to assume you knew where he was hiding the entire time and didn't act while people died.
How do you know who I am?
No need for modesty. You are Dr. Jonathan Reed.
Which brings up why you didn't know who he was when he entered your room.
And what a turn of fate. England's most esteemed blood specialist returns to London a vampire.
You almost might say it's a bit contrived, almost like we're in one of those bad video games.
That word, again, from a so-called man of science.
You were using the word vampire a minute ago and even getting technical by suggesting William was a subspecies.
Join my staff at Pembroke Hospital. as a physician.
Of course you should come work in my hospital. You can even kill any of my staff or patients that you like.
I even had the forethought to bring some clean clothes.
Clothes that are too big to fit me, don't match my style, and are suited only for a vampire stalking the streets of London. Forgetting the combat for a minute, and trust me, you will want to forget it, vampire roleplay is the main focus of the game. For me, that would mean turning into a swarm of bats, inviting travelers into my castle, and speaking with a thick Transylvanian accent. This game pretends that vampires are a lot like a Facebook algorithm that needs to know your entire personal history before it can suck you dry, and the choice of whom you kill is supposed to matter. Except when it doesn't. Kill some healthy vampire hunter that attacked you? That's worth 10 experience, and his death will not affect the district. Kill a loony sick patient in the hospital that believes she was undead? Well, that's worth over 1000 XP, and the district is now worse off. Forget the roving patrols of vampire hunters, the diseased scowls, and bodies lining the streets. What the district was really depending on was a bunch of sick patients and homeless drunks. If you were quick, you reach this part of the game before the 2-hour mark and can still return it on Steam, because you have now experienced everything the game has to offer, that being Eurojank combat and long conversations with boring NPCs.
Dr. Swansea insisted we provide you a quiet office. You'll find it on the 2nd floor with your name on the door.
Kingdom of my own. At least I won't be sleeping in a coffin.
Speaking of the sun, avoiding it and timing your activities around a day-night cycle sure would have been a fun part of playing a vampire. Too bad it doesn't factor in at all since the game only takes place at night.
Our supply of antiseptics is nearly depleted.
If combined correctly, certain household chemical products can be used in a pinch instead.
Or you could just use alcohol. What you're describing sounds more like making meth. A massive disconnect exists between gameplay and the world. Once I had a conversation with an NPC, only to turn the corner and find a scowl chowing down on a corpse on the side of the street. I'm left wondering how everyone is oblivious to the vampire menace when a horde of undead is just down the street from every district where NPCs congregate. Allow me to make your playthrough easier than mine. Skip through all the unimportant NPC chatter until you see blue text appear. This is the option that unlocks new details about them and other characters, which makes their blood more valuable when you help them slip the mortal coil, which you should do without reservations. Don't worry about getting the bad ending. I assure you, if you spent money on this game, you've already earned it. I would believe you if you told me this was the first game designed by an AI. There is such a straightforward mechanical nature to how the characters emote that it's hard to see any humanity behind it.
Past insufferable weeks, I've been the victim of extortion. I've made a first payment, but the blackmailer grows greedy.
How exactly was this blackmail going to work? If you went to a paper and told the editors that a rich noble is actually a vampire, I think they would show you the door.
My embarrassment in this matter is eclipsed only by my shame at having put the hospital at risk.
If this game could let go of its precious words for a minute, I would like to play some of it.
You're investigating something. This isn't a social call. One of those incompetent cunts slit a poor sod's vein.
I'm just going to tell you right now, this sick old lady you meet in the hospital is the cause of the sickness and is in fact the final boss. Let that sink in. The guy working with the nurse who is blackmailing Lady Ashbury wanders off into the sewers for absolutely no reason other than to be killed by a werewolf.
I'm a voucher for a free checkup in Whitechapel. What is Nurse Crane up to?
You already saw Nurse Crane give the guy a voucher and tell him what it was for. You could have followed her to Whitechapel and not even bothered with the sewer.
I must talk to that journalist or the poet. They must know about Darius.
Do you? Because it seems like instead of tracking down a poet and a journalist to get the old man to let you meet Nurse Crane, you could just climb over this fence to her makeshift hospital or turn into smoke and pass right through it. Would have been nice had they animated this scene so I could see our doctor character doing some actual doctoring.
This was not an influenza-induced seizure. I've never seen symptoms like these on the continent.
You are now aware of the fact that this game has super vampire flu.
If you did decide to sire an offspring, they must drink of your blood, Jonathan. Contrary to the legends, it is not as simple to make another vampire by just biting someone.
Well, the next section of the game is going to prove that concept wrong. No one holds a funeral in the middle of the night, and especially not in a graveyard packed full of undead. Am I the only one seeing that ludonarrative disconnect? You can't have normal people not acknowledge the monsters and move around freely if Jonathan has to fight his way down every street. Jonathan's sister is getting a way better burial. Jonathan was wheeled out to a pit and dumped without his family being informed. Mary, who was found at said pit, gets brought back for a proper burial. I like a narrative as much as the next guy, but goddamn, would it have killed them to show a bit of brevity? Every scene with Lady Ashbury stretches into a 15-minute conversation, so this Volcot species of vampire are primitive, prone to violence, serve as thugs for the aristocratic icons, and look like white guys in blackface.
What is it you seek? This age is sickly. An ancient poison, an older rage, brewed in a cauldron newly forged.
Oh, cryptic figures that speak in riddles so we have to guess what you're talking about. Will you ever change? No, because people are stupid and they usually stay that way.
Defeat the serpent of knowing with iron spur.
I could tell you what you need to know so you could stop the plague right now, but I'm not gonna.
Sean Hampton, The man we thought we'd saved at the docks. It seems he was infected after all.
You kind of have to lay the blame completely on Dr. Swansea here. He allowed Father Hampton into the hospital and didn't first ensure he wasn't infected with vampirism after he had been held captive and fed on by a vampire the other night.
Take this key of the old sewers. The entrance is by the riverbank, south from here. There you'll find all the proof you need.
Or you could just tell Jonathan that Harriet Jones is also now a vampire and you brought her here with you. And if he needs to see the proof with his own eyes, you could move that shelf in your room that leads to the passage right to the Scout sewer home instead of making him go the long way around. Thanks for the memories, I guess. This will be the final boss of the game. Just keep that in mind. Crosses and strong faith in God repel vampires as seen earlier, yet Father Hampton is able to wear a cross while maintaining his faith even though he's a vampire now.
This is the very flower my mother tossed on Mary's coffin.
Could you really recognize a specific flower that you only had a fleeting glance of from a distance?
Mary, is it really you?
It is, and makes no sense because as Lady Ashbury explained, you can only sire a vampire by having a mortal drink a vampire's blood. Jonathan bit Mary and killed her, but she never drank from him, yet she still became a vampire. So much talking. This game would have been better off as an anime visual novel. At least those have nudity. I speak for everyone who has ever played this game when I say, fuck this boss fight. Fuck this boss fight in particular. Well, that was incredibly pointless. Her first death already served the purpose of motivating Jonathan. Is he supposed to be more motivated now that he killed her a second time?
As I shed one last red tear for my fallen sister.
Really? Vampires cry blood tears. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe classic vampires can be just as bad as teen fiction versions.
This is no time for petty quarrels, my champion. Can you not hear? The famished queen has awoken.
You were the one who sired Jonathan, so you know all this stuff you are spouting is meaningless to him.
The land calls for a champion. All and everyone needs you.
I'd love to get involved with this, but I don't know what the story is! I've been playing for hours and almost nothing has happened, except that I discovered that the Spanish flu is turning people into vampires.
Come in, we have much to discuss.
She isn't kidding when she says that. This conversation will last for 20 real-world minutes. This is like watching two coma patients emote. Can you make a face? Get a leg cramp? Anything to let me know that you aren't dead? Well, dead. You know what I mean. If this camera angle doesn't change soon, I'm going to get burn-in on my monitor. Seriously, who was the cutscene director on this game? There is almost zero technique on display with the shot placements and character actions. This is how old daytime soap operas were filmed.
For he never goes outside the club. And women are not awarded membership, even immortals.
Those damn cis white male vampires. What the hell am I playing?
As long as they deny access to female applicants, I will leave them to their antediluvian considerations as to the natural order of things.
I am convinced that Elizabeth's mentioning of antediluvian is a hint from someone on the dev team that we should be playing Bloodlines the Masquerade instead. Ladies, if you do this expecting a guy to feel your heartbeat, you are fooling yourself.
Would you ask the same question of a man?
Actually, yes. I ask the same question to everyone who dares to go outside at night, considering the risks.
Well, if you must know, I campaign for the right to vote for all women. Why should I wait to the age of 30 years when men can vote at 21?
If you are going to stick pointed political messaging in your game, you still have to do it well. More often than not, when games try to convey modern political ideas, it comes off so on the nose that it turns into self-parody. And this game is no different, with Elizabeth and her daughter battling the male vampire patriarchy. By the way, game, since we're signaling our virtue right now, what was with that black-faced vampire earlier?
The centuries have taught me never to trust a woman completely, especially if she is immortal. Too prone to emotions, if you ask me. Too fickle when it comes to important decisions.
Was it necessary to go down this path in your vampire game? I get that this is the same studio that made Life is Strange, but feminism and modern societal ills had a place in that game. This is about vampires and Spanish flu.
Is he worthy? Is his blood pure?
This suddenly turned into a very different type of club. Lord Redgrave recruited Jonathan into the Ascalon Club to hunt down the infection in the West End. You can proceed right from your initiation, out the front door to find a person who knows about a house just around the corner that is infected. All of the members of the Ascalon Club couldn't be bothered to walk around their city block and ask people questions. After killing her family, this scout decided to sit hunched over in a chair for who knows how long until someone arrived to check and see if the body in the chair was alive or not.
Doris Fletcher is no more. All that remains are the dreams of the queen she was, and the queen she'll be.
It's fitting this boss fight takes place on a stage with a hokey actress. This entire game has felt like a bad high school play full of unwilling participants who are embarrassed to be here.
Is she pretty? Is she sweet and tender?
To me, yes.
Ah!
What a waste of opportunity this game is. I am truly and deeply sorry for how negative this video has become. I normally try to keep Sin videos to lighthearted ribbing, but this game is from the primest cut of boring.
After all, isn't it the natural role of a woman to support her man in victory?
Who knew female vampires would be so concerned with equal rights?
You thrust your lance and pierced the very heart of the corruption.
Did you have to make that sound so dirty?
What would you have me do about Dawson?
The man is dangerous. Did you know he plans to build a wall to separate the healthy rich from the sickly poor?
I really want to give this game the benefit of a doubt when it comes to the politician who wants to build a wall after being made into a vampire, but I've seen enough to know that this is more pointed political commentary on modern-day issues.
Finally you're here, Dr. Reed. What took you so long?
I had to pass several of your barricades and outposts to access your mansion, sir.
I'll say, I had to go through a scowl-infested sewer because the Lord of the Night here can't climb a wooden fence in front of your house. And you, the dying man who is desperate to become a vampire, couldn't be bothered to make getting here easy even though you knew he was coming while you were on your deathbed.
You'll need to feed on warm blood. Blood from mortals. How do you feel about that?
I'm rich, Dr. Reed, and powerful. I'm sure I'll be able to acquire all the blood I need without ever having to sully my own hands.
Please explain in detail all the ways you are a terrible human being and would be an even worse immortal. We didn't have time to develop your character, so this interview will have to suffice.
I will build a wall that will separate the sick boroughs from the healthy ones.
I would sigh right now, but the length required for it would cause me to pass out.
Ultraviolet curtains and orichalcum powder.
Excuse me? Jonathan just exited that same elevator. How are you stepping out of it behind him? It didn't go back down.
This is a drop of King Arthur's blood. The blood of a true defender of Britain. Stronger than your evil powers.
How did you get fresh blood from King Arthur? This is something I wouldn't mind a conversation about, especially since Jonathan's sire is technically Merlin by another name. So why would Arthur's blood repel vampires when they apparently worked for him? I just love it when characters pull swords out of nowhere when they start fighting. Makes writing the sins easy since there was so little effort put into the presentation. I don't really care for anime, but I think I might watch Helsing for a much better version of Irish guy fights a vampire.
As a physician, I know all too well when it's too late. Punctured lung, broken ribs, and internal bleeding.
You seem to be speaking pretty well for someone with punctured lungs.
Horace and Harriet shared more than a hidden family bond. They were the embodiment of the epidemic and are linked to the Pembroke Hospital. Come on, Edgar, this is no coincidence.
I swear I'm at a complete loss. All I did was administer vampire blood to cure old Harriet.
Why would you think that would work? You know that vampire blood will only turn someone into a vampire, not cure the flu.
Harriet Jones was the primary case, but do you know what a healthy carrier is?
There is a tone in your voice that frightens me, Jonathan.
Is there? Because his monotone is nearly as rock steady as mine. Was that really the painting you were working on before Jonathan interrupted? Just because she's a vampire doesn't mean she has to paint pictures of blood or paint with blood. God, this is stupid.
And where would that be? Life is strange.
Roll credit. Oh, wrong game.
Now would be a good time to blend the recipe Marshall used when he fought the disaster.
Before he can confront Harriet, Jonathan first has to make an elixir from the blood of King Arthur, William Marshall, and insulin to protect himself from the blood of hatred. Look, I'll be honest, I didn't bother reading all the notes this game presents to you, so I'm willing to accept that maybe some of this was explained in those. But when a game has talked my ear off for 20 hours, I don't really feel like deep diving into the game's written lore. The climax of your game is supposed to be the highlight, where you pull out all the stops. This game has you revisiting levels from the start of the game, before returning to the sewers to confront a dying old woman.
No more riddles. Enough of the obscure songs and prophecies. I ask questions, and you answer them.
My words have been as clear as crystal lakes, my child. You seem unwilling to drink. To listen.
For a game that does nothing but talk, it sure hasn't told me anything important until now. Merlin, or whatever his name is, could have told Jonathan all about the Red Goddess, Harriet Jones, and the blood of hatred a long time ago, but took the cryptic route of letting him discover it himself for no reason at all.
What is the blood of hate?
It is the curse of the goddess. It is the hunger in you, the need for blood, The will.
Someone needs to take this game out behind the woodshed, calmly explain how show don't tell works, then put both barrels into the back of its head. That's right, everyone. The climax of this game is fighting a cranky old woman possessed by a vampire goddess that was spreading vampire influenza across London. Let us all salute the elite squadron of brain cells that died upon hearing that sentence. The combat is nowhere near good enough to make this exciting, but maybe some music could have at least raised my pulse a bit, if the game had bothered. This fight occurs to the sounds of pain groans only. Nice joke, game. Haha, you got me. But I already beat the final boss. You can play the ending cutscene, roll the credits, and then maybe a post-credit sequel bait scene. Game? Why is everyone still talking? Game? It's morning and the sun is shining, yet Jonathan is unaffected.
How many have you created? Who else? Shakespeare? Isaac Newton? Alfred the Great? Francis Drake? Thomas More? Guy Fawkes?
But yes, one of those you named is your immortal brother.
You can save some of this info for the sequel. It wasn't that interesting to begin with. I have never encountered something like this before. I beat the final boss. The game should be over. But instead, it makes me explore an empty castle to find Elizabeth. Then spend over an hour talking to her, Merlin, and William Marshall about the blood of hatred.
And what of your daughter?
Charlotte is a strong, independent woman.
That's the line you say when you are poking fun at feminism, not when you are trying to be serious about it. Since William Marshall is the original carrier of the blood of hatred, and he passed it down to his progeny Elizabeth, who passed it down to Harriet through Dr. Swansea, Jonathan should also now be infected with it since he used William Marshall's blood in his elixir to protect him from the blood of hatred.
End! End! For the love of God, end!
He just kept talking in one long, incredibly unbroken sentence.